Have you ever been in the middle of a completely normal, everyday conversation and suddenly your heart just drops? It's a visceral, heavy feeling. For a lot of people, the panic that hits in that moment isn't because they're in a bad or unhealthy relationship. It's actually because the idea of conflict itself feels emotionally dangerous. Even when the other person is entirely calm, even when the relationship is incredibly loving and nobody is raising their voice, their body still reacts like something fundamentally important is about to fall apart. And the hardest part is, a lot of times, they don't even understand why. We're talking about people who easily handle high-stress jobs, tight deadlines, and overwhelming daily responsibilities without even blinking. But one simple sentence from someone they love can instantly make their chest tighten.
I mean, think about those 4 words. We need to talk. For someone who carries this kind of conflict anxiety, those words don't sound neutral. They sound like pure emotional danger. It's an intense physical reaction. Before your brain can even begin to process what the conversation might actually be about, your body has already shifted into full defense mode. The air gets thin, your mind starts racing, and it's all triggered by the feeling of impending conflict, even when everything around you is objectively safe.
Let me tell you about Sophia. She really started to notice this about herself about a year into her relationship with Daniel. And the thing is, their relationship was healthy in literally all the ways she had always wanted. Daniel was patient, he was consistent, emotionally available. He didn't yell when they disagreed, he never punished her with the silent treatment, and he certainly never minimized her feelings. But somehow, the thought of having a conflict with him still terrified her. One Sunday afternoon, they were just doing chores, cleaning their apartment together, when Daniel casually looked over and said, "Hey, can we talk about something later tonight?"
Sophia just smiled on autopilot and said, "Yeah, of course." But internally, her entire nervous system just shifted. For the next 4 hours, she couldn't focus on a single thing. Her mind was frantically replaying every interaction they'd had over the past week, just desperately searching for what she did wrong. She's thinking maybe she sounded too distant on Thursday. Maybe she disappointed him. Or worse, maybe he was secretly losing feelings for her. By the time evening rolled around, she was completely emotionally exhausted. And the real tragedy of it all is that she had spent hours bracing herself for an emotional loss that hadn't even happened.
So later that night, they sit down together on the couch, and Daniel just speaks in this really gentle voice. He says, "I've just been feeling like we haven't had much quality time lately." And that was it. There was no attack in his voice. There was zero blame. There was absolutely no rejection at all, just his honest feelings. But Sophia still felt the sting of tears pressing behind her eyes because she was bracing for a massive impact that simply never came. You see, she wasn't having this intense reaction because Daniel was an unsafe person. She was reacting because the conflict itself felt unsafe inside her body. Think about it this way. This is what emotional danger really is. It's when your body perceives conflict as an immediate threat to your safety and your connection with someone, completely regardless of what's actually happening in the present reality. And that is a profound, incredibly heavy weight that so many people quietly carry with them into perfectly healthy relationships.
This dynamic usually shows up in people who grew up associating conflict with severe emotional instability. Maybe you learned really early on that disagreements always, inevitably, ended in screaming. Or maybe you learned that conflict meant unpredictable withdrawal, or harsh criticism, or just this deep, freezing emotional distance. Over time, your body gets deeply confused. It literally stops distinguishing between healthy conflict, which is actually rooted in honesty and wanting a better connection, and dangerous conflict. Your body doesn't pause to analyze it, it just reacts.
To survive that kind of dangerous conflict in the past, your nervous system had to adapt. And it usually adapts in this really tragic, quiet little sequence. Step 1, you stay agreeable. Step 2, you stay incredibly careful. And step 3, you keep the peace at absolutely all costs. You choose peace because back then, keeping the peace felt so much safer than being honest. But when you bring those old survival steps into your present-day life, you start building walls right where there should be bridges.
The body just has such a long memory. And that's exactly why you might find yourself apologizing immediately, even when you're the one who got hurt. It's why you feel the need to over-explain yourself over the tiniest little disagreements. It's why that silence hanging in the air after a tense moment feels completely unbearable. And it's why you feel real physical anxiety when someone just says, "We should talk." Your nervous system isn't just reacting to the present moment. It's reacting to all the emotional memories your body is still holding on to.
And honestly, this is where things can get deeply confusing when you're finally in a healthy relationship. Because you have an emotionally safe partner sitting right there, looking at you, saying really reassuring things like, "I'm not angry," or "You don't have to be scared to talk to me," or just simply, "We're okay." But the body takes a really long time to actually believe those words. You can't just logic your way into emotional safety overnight. Usually it's something that has to be experienced over and over again before your nervous system finally lets out that breath it's been holding. Going back to Daniel and Sophia, Daniel started noticing Sophia's patterns pretty slowly. He saw how, whenever a tiny conflict bubbled up, she would become instantly hyper-alert. He could literally hear her breathing change. Her tone of voice would soften entirely too quickly. She would just rush to fix things, to smooth the waters over, before he even had the chance to finish speaking his mind. He realized he was watching a deep-seated survival mechanism unfold right in front of him.
So one night, after a really minor disagreement about some canceled plans, Daniel gently asked her something that completely shifted things. He asked, "Why does it feel like you're apologizing for existing right now?" And that question caught her totally off guard. Because, honestly, she didn't know the answer. She just knew that conflict made her feel emotionally unsafe in ways she just couldn't explain with logic. What Daniel's question actually uncovered is this hidden reality that so many of us carry around. It's the realization that people aren't actually afraid of communication itself. They are terrified of the emotional abandonment that they believe is hiding just behind that communication. It's this deep, sinking fear that one difficult conversation, one single misstep, could suddenly change how loved they are. They are terrified that honesty will ultimately cost them their connection.
And when you live with that specific fear for long enough, you stop expressing yourself naturally. You become incredibly emotionally strategic. You learn to be hyper-careful with your tone, careful with expressing your needs, careful with showing even a hint of disappointment. And I want to be clear, this isn't being manipulative, it's protective. Because when conflict used to feel emotionally dangerous, that instinct for emotional self-protection becomes entirely automatic.
That is exactly why emotional safety is so deeply foundational in a relationship. Not because healthy couples just magically never disagree, but because emotionally safe relationships teach your nervous system something totally new. True emotional safety is the actual experience of surviving emotional tension without losing the connection. It teaches your body that conflict does not automatically equal rejection. You learn that you can disagree and still stay deeply connected. You can express your hurt and you will still be loved. But unlearning those old patterns and teaching your body that you can survive emotional tension without losing the relationship, that takes time, especially if your body learned the exact opposite growing up. A few weeks after Daniel asked her that big question, Sophia had this really quiet, small moment that changed something deep inside her. They were having another disagreement, this time just about visiting family over the holidays. Normally, in that exact moment, Sophia would have immediately backed down just to avoid the tension. She would have taken the familiar, comfortable path of keeping the peace. But instead, she paused, and she admitted something so deeply vulnerable. She looked at him and said, "I think I'm more afraid of disappointing you than I am of the actual conversation." Daniel just looked at her so gently, and then he said the exact thing her nervous system had been needing to hear for years. He said, "You're allowed to disagree with me without fearing I'll stop loving you." Sophia didn't even respond right away because, some sentences don't just hit you emotionally all at once. They land slowly, quietly. It's almost like warmth returning to parts of you that have been emotionally tense and frozen for a very long time.
Now, that moment didn't just magically erase her fear overnight. It doesn't work like that. But what it did was create a new emotional experience. And healing almost always begins exactly there. It doesn't start with you suddenly becoming flawless or totally fearless. It begins with slowly, patiently teaching your body that your emotional honesty can actually survive the connection. It begins the moment you realize that love doesn't just evaporate the second conflict walks into the room.
Before we close, if today's message resonated with you and you want to go deeper into transforming your marriage through self-awareness and emotional understanding, I've written a Kindle book called Harmonious Marriage: Elevate Your Marriage with Self-Awareness. It's designed to help couples break negative patterns and build emotional safety step by step. You can find it in the description below. And if you're drawn to ancient wisdom applied to modern relationships, explore my second book, Mantras of Love, based on Hindu wisdom. It blends timeless principles with practical guidance for real-life connection. Both links are in the description. Take your next step toward healing today.
And if these conversations are helping you feel a little more emotionally understood, I'd really love to invite you to subscribe to ReframeUs. We're here sharing weekly emotional storytelling and psychology insights, and it's all designed to help your relationships feel emotionally safe again.
Because at the end of the day, that fear of conflict you might be carrying, it's not a weakness. It truly never was. Sometimes it's simply your nervous system remembering what old emotional pain felt like. And sometimes, healing finally begins when you experience a disagreement and there's no emotional abandonment waiting for you on the other side. Conflict does not automatically mean rejection. So just ask yourself, what would your relationships look like and who could you become if your body finally believed that? Thank you so much for being here, and please take gentle care of yourselves.